recording is in progress, and I have Robert today here with me. I'm very happy, and yeah, I would like you to give the I would like to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself first.
Great. Yeah, I'll keep it brief because I think we have many minutes for questions and learning more. Yeah, so I'm Robert MacKenzie. Somewhere there's officially a doctor there that I don't use very often. Um, I am 47 years old, currently live in Zurich, Switzerland. I suppose in terms of my career, you'd classify me as a technology company executive. I was born and raised in Canada, in Windsor, Ontario, just south of Detroit. But I moved to Europe at the age of 23, knowing no other foreign languages. We'll come to that maybe later on. So I've now spent, let's say, more than half of my adult life living outside of Canada, so in Europe, or just say global citizens. I became adult in Europe, if you want to say it that way.
Hmm.
Last few points. Yeah, I guess maybe some of the other most important aspects. It's not just about career, right? So I'm a proud father of two wonderful daughters, 9 and 7, and I've been together with my wife Elizabeth since 2009, when she just magically walked into my apartment, and that's how we met. So maybe I gave you enough breadcrumbs there to ask a few questions. I'll keep that introduction maybe at that point.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, and I really like the fact that you said that you became an adult in Europe, and that was later than 23, right? So because when you're younger, you think, yeah, I'm an adult now, right? I'm adulting all over the place, but the reality is different, and it takes a while. And but yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of things that I'm interested in, and yeah, going back to being born and raised in Canada, I'm always interested in the upbringing. So that means what kind of environment have you been grown up? So what kind of uh, yeah, people you've been surrounded with, what kind of school or what kind of hobbies did you had? So these are the things that I'm very interested in because sometimes it shows, it can give some ideas what comes afterwards. So yeah, please.
Gladly. Yeah, so I was raised on a farm, more or less in the middle of nowhere, in very or outside of the city, Windsor, Ontario. It was about a 25 minute car ride into that city, and there was essentially nothing else except for a few neighbors' houses on the street where I was living. Most of those neighbors, at least right nearby, were my family. So what my grandfather did many years ago when he bought the farm is as his children became older and they married, and he gave them a plot of land to build houses on next to that house. So then the brothers and my wife or my mother, they helped build each other's houses, and then sort of a small community grew. So I grew up as the oldest grandchild, right next to my grandparents and living right next to my aunts and uncles as they had children, and then I had a growing community of cousins to both play with and or take care of as I was growing up. So it's quite ideal in that sense. My parents were not farmers. They were then just typical workers. My father worked for Bell Canada, a telecom company, initially just installing phone wires. And eventually, when he retired, he had made it up to senior project manager for quite large technology projects. My mother worked in a bank for many years. I had one sister, younger sister, and yeah, there's a lot more where I can go in this direction. Maybe I'll stop there to see where you want to expand in terms of upbringing.
I mean, this is something that I always found very interesting. I mean, this is one of my dreams to surround myself or have the opportunity to have friends and family living right next to me and growing up. I do understand now that I'm not don't live in a big city anymore. I used to live in Berlin. Now I'm living in a smaller place south of Stuttgart. I can imagine that it also, I mean, it has benefits because you're surrounded by family and friends, but it also somehow puts you under the radar, puts you under the microscope. So there's always some people. I mean, depends. I think depends on the kind of family and the kind of vibe that is there, but um, people have opinions, people have ideas how other people should live their lives. And so, very often, when I talk to people that are coming from smaller places, they had the urge to leave and to really understand who they are, to explore more. their own identity versus being a sum or a product of your environment. How is that for you? Did you f did you feel that way, or did you say no, or did you felt no? This is very natural for me, and now it's a step to go outside and going and to a bigger city, and yeah, I'm interested in that.
So there are definitely elements of what you're talking about in my story too. Maybe different. I'm familiar with where you live because I also lived for a while in Tübingen. So, and worked in Ulm and lived in Stuttgart Feuerbach. So I kind of know that area very, very well. Um, so, I mean, in Germany, there is sort of this small town Dorf Mentalität, or the town mentality, small town mentality. It's not really what I had. Like, so I think the community where I was, it was so small that there wasn't like an interconnected community. It was just family was around, so of course there were expectations and whatnot there. But that wasn't the driving force for me wanting to leave. Um, so how do I say this? So to keep it precise and yet explanatory, uh, the region in which I grew up didn't suit me. So I always felt at home in Canada. Again, super loving family, really ideal in many cases. But I was also very much trapped on the farm, right? So I wanted to buy a chocolate bar, for example. I would have to ride my bicycle about an hour, hour and a half to the nearest store, and with trucks and big cars were going fast me back and forth. So it was very isolated. Mobility wasn't good. There was no internet, right? It was the 80s. We didn't have MTV. There was no cable, right? So it was just like me and the farm machinery to work with. So the isolation was a bit of a big deal because I always felt I wanted to interact more with the world. And my parents were amazing, but they also didn't know how to feed this drive for interaction. Some of the things I wanted to do over time that I discovered is I wanted to speak multiple languages, and my environment didn't support that. It's like, no, English, only English. Why would you need anything other than English? I wanted to use technology, and technology wasn't really a thing. So I remember even when I was young, like trying to build my own remote control cars out of scrap pieces around the farm. Didn't quite work out at the time, but I tried. So to kind of expand the picture now, maybe to leap to Europe is yes, I needed to go see the world. And as I started university, I had the chance to become involved in what they called cooperative programs. So you go to school for 4 months, another 4 months, those are the semesters, even though they were trimesters. And then you would, as an engineer, find work for 4 months. And I kept moving farther and farther and farther away from my home to kind of expand my circle. I started with travel very, very early, and yet it wasn't enough because I was looking for a place that had vision, that allowed me to what I call live an integrated life. Speak multiple languages, walk out the door, buy bread at the local bakery, buy flowers around the corner, but also go into nature. Grew up on a farm, but for me to reach that famous Canadian nature, it was about a 6 or 7 hour car ride past shopping malls, parking lots, other farms to reach that. And that's what I eventually found in Europe. So I needed to discover the world, but it wasn't because I was trapped with a small town mentality. It were other elements that played that kind of made me seek, want to find myself in the larger world.
You said something that I definitely will go come back later on, like vision, for example. So there's a big topic, especially at the moment when it comes to Europe, US, China, robotics, AI. But let's spend a few more moments on university time. This is very formative for many young people. Um, would you like to share a little bit about this? So what kind of how was it for you to enter university, and how did you decide what you wanted to do, or and did you change majors or minors? Maybe you can say a little bit
Gladly,
about this.
and let's bring in some of the struggles along the way. So I generally was always a very high achieving student. And this changed a little bit just at the end of high school, being of university. Why? Because I realized that I financially wasn't in a position, nor was my family, to really afford, yeah, typical North American education, right? It still costs, at the time, even then, one semester was 3,000. just in fees and then books and accommodation on top of that. So, definitely not as much as in the US, but still not cheap. So I started in grade 11 working at the local fast food restaurants. I quickly became the manager of that restaurant as sort of the youngest, sort of at the time ever in my province. And that's where I discovered my love and my talent for leading people and everything. We can maybe come back on that later as well. The dark side of that, was I was very engaged in that because I found this sort of other passion in addition to school. So I was working late shifts and night shifts and in many ways burning the candle at both ends, right? Really using all my energy. So, while the grades were good, right, they weren't at that excellent scholarship level that maybe others would have achieved if they had only studied. But I was able to save up enough money. So basically, that was one of the struggles. I couldn't go to, let's say, my university of choice because my grades were just below that cutoff, and I didn't still have the money, but I had the money saved up in a local scholarship at my local university. So I kind of remained in the trap for a few more years. But I have to say that was a good decision, because I discovered as well going into university that I had to relearn how to learn
Mm.
in the first year of university, and having, let's say, the additional comfort or not having additional struggles of being in a whole new environment and living by myself for the first time, I think gave me the buffer and comfort zone I needed to kind of relearn how to learn. So then again, my grades in first university were good, but not at the level that I wanted it. But then that improved over the time, right? So I think this was a way of kind of overcoming some of those struggles and finding out my place in the world at the time and knowing how much energy to put in what effort at what point in time. And eventually found my way in the second and third year of university.
And was this hard on the ego? Was this because you can, I mean, there's always the opportunity to say my grades aren't that good because I'm working so hard, and then, but on the other side, education at other places are so expensive, and I don't have the money, so I stay here. But then realizing this kind of expectations, I mean, they could come from outside, but they can also come from inside. Says I need to go somewhere else. I need to go to a prestigious university, and then coming down and coming back and saying, hey, it's kind of comfort being in the same environment that I used to be, and being near the people that I like and love, but also giving you the peace of mind, because you understood some very important topic that plays a major role in almost everything that you'd like to achieve in your life, learning how to learn. So there's these two sides, right? So there's this one side, and then there's the other side. So was that something that you felt that you were aware of, or was it something? So yeah.
Yes, so I was very aware of it. You asking the question makes me remember that I was also very aware of it at the time. But to be honest, my ego needed a kick a little bit, to reset itself.
Nice.
Sort of always being that top student and then going somewhere else and then not being that top student, right? What does it feel like? And I think doing that allowed me to reconnect with my fellow students in the group, where we found a way to lift each other up.
Mm.
And I became one of the main actors in helping this group of people lift each other up. So we sort of inappropriately had the name at the time we called ourselves Team Xerox. Xerox is the photocopying company, and not because we were copying each other's work. It was for different reasons. University books were so expensive that we would find access to a university book and then copy the pages we needed to save money. But anyways, and then this group became a very well-knit unit, and we really helped each other up. And then by the end of university, like we were all receiving extremely top grades, right? So my ego needed that kick, and I think I needed to, not always be the top person in the room, to realize how I can reinvent myself or be in different ways the top person in the room. And I think, well, I know at the time that I realized I wanted to, that I'm playing the long game here, right? It wasn't about, hey, my life is set because of one university I go to. And I decided I will eventually be at a prestigious university. but when it's the right time for me to earn that or obtain that. And that happened. We'll come to that point in the story, I guess, very soon. Um, yeah. So yeah, and in the end, I'm very thankful, right, for this particular struggle in life because I think it helped me advance more than I probably even wanted to admit at that time.
And was it something that somebody taught you, somebody pointed out? Maybe you read something or you heard something about this? Did you had a mentor? I'm always very interested in how people, because you made it through, but the question is, how was that possible? Was that something that, I mean, yeah, please enlighten me.
Uh, so I haven't had a lot of luck with mentors in my life, so I'd have to say no, there wasn't a real mentor. There have been some fantastic people. My grandfather, very typical uneducated, grade four education farmer. So not educated, but one of the smartest people I've ever met. So I don't think he was a mentor that helped me realize all these things in life, but he was definitely in some ways a different type of pillar, a very important personality, where I realized that you can achieve other great things, even if you don't have the university stamp. Um, and my father played an influential role in many ways. I had also one uncle who went to university. He started a PhD, never finished it, which is why in my family I'm the first person to have ever still achieved that level of education. And I think they opened certain doors for me, but in terms of these other realizations, in terms of ego, in terms of leadership, I believe that was more of a self-discovery, right? And sort of indirectly supported by these other personalities that I mentioned, and of course many others.
Thanks for going this way. Yeah, maybe it is now time to discover the prestigious university stamp that you were mentioning earlier on. Um, After finishing university, because you said that you went from you came to Europe when you were 23, that seems about that time because you are not finishing a PhD with 23. I mean, you might, but majority of people are not. So maybe you can share a little bit about this.
Yeah. So this is definitely where I say, with my career or resume started to become very colorful, right? So I had mentioned that I was doing these these work programs for 4 months a year as an engineer at university, and I kept going farther and farther and farther. And the last one was in North Carolina, Raleigh, North Carolina, with IBM. And then graduation was approaching, and I was being approached by, at the time, all the dot-com companies, Motorola and Hewlett Packard, like big names of the day, right? Cisco and in Canada, JD Uniphase, and some of these companies just don't even exist anymore, at least not in the same form. And it didn't feel right to take these offers and be pulled in by these companies. And this is where this dream of saying no, I want to go out and discover the world and take a path less often chosen. That's when I made that conscious decision to say no to that life and take a risk. Um, so Canada at the time wasn't very good at helping people go abroad. I don't know if it's improved, to be honest. Um, and a lot of stories on that for another time. And I found an international learning and exchange organization called Isaac. And in my final few months, sort of became more involved with this organization. It wasn't very active at my university at the chapter. So in some ways, I joined. I gained access to their IT systems. In fact, I hacked into one by finding my way into the US database that had access to all the worldwide exchange offerings, and I was able to create my own match to a company in Germany, Hewlett Packard. And at some point, it was a decision between Germany or Finland. I chose Germany. And then I went abroad with this organization. I'll fast forward here to come to the university you were talking about, because then I spent a year, probably one of the best years of my life, living in Tübingen, working at Hewlett Packard, exploring the country, and becoming in parallel involved with the organization. So I one of the things that I became known for in this organization was I became kind of a greater well-known conference moderator. So that more and more conferences that were taking place would invite me to come, and I would be that main energetic voice that would gather people in the plenary and coordinate things, give great messages, etc. Um,
Sorry,
and
which year is that?
that was 2000 to 2001. And this year was so fantastic and so formative, and I learned German so quickly and all these other superlatives from that year that I decided to stay in Europe and stay in Germany. And during that time, I had applied to universities, including Karlsruhe, now known as KIT. At the time, it wasn't, and I joined a master's program there in 2002. There were struggles there, but maybe I'll skip some of those to fast forward that. Finished my master's, coming back to the grades team with top grade 1.0, so my master's project. It's very good. Um, and another choice, right? Do I go and work or and then this organization that I mentioned provided me another offer that said we want you to come and kind of lead this organization for a term. So I was invited to candidate myself, and I was nominated to then join the executive team of this international organization, of the German chapter, which was the largest part of the organization of the world at that time. Did that for about a year and a half. That was a fantastic executive leadership experience. It's not technology, but technology was missing. And then that's when I made the decision to begin looking for that final education. And I was starting to have my struggles in Germany, which we can come to at some other point if you ask a question about that, and decided, to up the ante. Okay, I've been to Karlsruhe after Windsor. Now, what's the next level? Is there a next level? There's this great university in Zurich that I applied to, and I was accepted by coincidence. The professor that was there, 1 or 2 years earlier, had bought the device from the institute where I had finished my master's degree that I had built essentially. So it was a no-brainer that he welcomed me with open arms to his institute, and that's how I came to Zurich, Switzerland, in 2006, and started my doctorate at the ETH Zurich.
I can, how do you say this? I experienced your German live. We talked the first time that we talked. Actually, we switched between. I think we talked the first half hour for in German, and then we talked in English. So I was
Yeah,
very well
exactly.
aware of your German or your multi-language skills. Um, I really like the idea of you having this dream or this goal, and through some detours, we're finally be able to come to a prestigious university. I mean, KIT, as you said, or Karlsruhe. Um, I think later on, these kind of universities understood that you do need to become a brand to attract good talents. And Germany has a few technical universities that came together. They call themselves Technical Universities Nine. So there are nine of them
Yeah,
in Germany.
there was a
And
lighthouse or something like that at one point, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
But what I really like is that those dots that get connected every now and then throughout the journey. And you were mentioning that device that you were essentially building at Karlsruhe in your masters through your masters. That was one of the key points that made it. Well, yeah, not made it possible, but maybe really helped you to um, getting to Zurich and to the ETH. You mentioned this just very briefly, and we don't need to stay too long on this topic. But you were talking about struggles, and I'm always very interested in struggles because you can learn from other people's struggles, right? You can watch documentaries, you can read biographies, or you can talk to people. And here I'm here to talking to you, so maybe you can say something about the struggles. Maybe there had been culturally differences. Maybe there had been personally, yeah. Before I start coming up with more ideas, maybe you can just tell me how was that time for you?
yeah, gladly. So I'll try to do some rapid fire struggles with enough explanation so people understand. So when I was on this national executive team in Germany, It was fantastic. Again, it was one of these magical years. Very strong team, very talented individuals, and we came together as a team. So we set records for the organization and the most exchanges ever. We were able to increase the budget. We were able to financially fund events, and the list goes on and on and on. It was a very, very, very successful year. But there was also a time where I had my first contact with what burnout could mean. I didn't reach that point, but I kind of I was scratching the surface of what that could be, because we were doing sort of like MacKenzie like hours and more. If there's a next level, we were touching upon that for a year and a half because of the intrinsic motivation that went along with this job and cool things like I met President Horst Köhler at the time in Germany. I went to the castle or the Schloss Bellevue, and you'd spend evenings kind of negotiating with diplomats, and then in the day or the next morning, right, you'd be in jeans and t-shirts speaking to students at universities. So it was a very, very dynamic job. But that touch upon burnout was definitely a struggle. I think Germany was a fantastic time. I wouldn't want to change the 5.5 years I had there. I think there was one element that was bothering me though, was no matter how much German I learned or how much Schlager that I could sing, right? This label of being a foreigner, Ausländer, seemed kind of always present, right, in various forms. Again, we can touch about that in deeper form. And that bothered me, and a few other things too. So I had this feeling of not really knowing where I physically belonged in the world. So those were at least two struggles that I can mention around that time. I remember when I came to Zurich for my interview with this professor I briefly mentioned. I was walking through the city, and it was a summer day, walking down the Bahnhofstrasse, sort of the main shopping street, to the lake. That's not the most impressive part of the city, depending on what your definition of impressive is. I didn't know that at the time, but somehow when I reached the lake and looking around, it's just amazing weather and blue skies and water, everything. All this burden of where do I belong in the world disappeared in a way that I can't explain. I'm not esoteric at all, but somehow I just knew that I had sort of landed in a new physical location that seemed to match me, and it gave me a lot of energy to bring into the interview with the professor. Probably another element that added to me winning the spot over other candidates. So yeah, and I think then there was a few years where there was less struggle because that was kind of a magical time to start in Zurich. Things kind of flew. I mean, doing a PhD is you always feel like you're failing constantly for the first year, but that's just the nature of it. At some point, it kind of clicks. So, but I think maybe we can go beyond some of the academic struggles.
Yeah.
It's because maybe last sentence is because yeah, like universities have been a theme so far in what we've been talking about, but that was never really my goal. I think my goal was overarching. It was not My goal was never to be at a world-class university. That was a nice milestone along the way. I had already known even back in when my studies began in Canada, my goal was to never become an engineer. I knew that I wanted to become a leader of technology companies somehow. I didn't know what that meant or how big, how small. That was the goal that I was aiming for. And then I started putting together over time a recipe that allowed me to then slowly reach that more and more throughout my career and throughout my life.
Yeah, thanks for giving some insights here. The area that you're in now at the moment is kind of known as the Robotic Valley or the Silicon Valley of Europe. So there's a few words flowing around, but one of the benefits of being in these kind of places, and here we have like the city of Zurich, but then also the world of the ETH University, that is an accelerator, that is a hub, that is uh, yeah, just a melting pot of so many different talents from all over the world. Uh, what happened? What happened there? Because today we can see there's a lot of companies coming out of this hub, and in the area of AI and robotics. Yeah, maybe we can now enter the world of business, the world of how it is to work on a product, how it is to work with customers. So maybe you can share a little bit about this, what happened to you or with you, and how did you manage? And as you said, you were putting together different pieces and to reach that goal that was unarticulated yet. So yeah, I'm very keen on that.
Yeah, so maybe let's then briefly talk about those pieces. You've mentioned them without maybe knowing you're mentioning them. But yeah, so I think the three things that I wanted to become excellent at in my life, and if I've achieved that, that's what other people should say, and not I should claim it here. But that's where I've been aiming for is the leadership of people and organizations. And I mentioned a few examples briefly in the past, whether it's the Taco Bell restaurant, fast food chain, or this international organization in Germany. Technology, which of course at this point had been mostly represented by me as an engineer in the universities that we talked about. And then the being good at business and being good at turning something into a product and bringing that product into the hands of people was the third pillar that I wanted to master. So around 2010-ish, when I had finished my PhD, around 3.5 years, um, that last pillar, the business one, product one, wasn't fully mastered yet. And the programs at the ETH to help technologies that leave the university and go into the world existed, but I think they were still in their infancy in many ways. So ETH gave me a lot. There's a lot of great things I can say about it. Maybe I'll circle back on the other companies coming out of it later on. But at the time, I kind of knew that I was on my own for this journey. So in the years that followed, I became very conscious about looking for opportunities that would help me develop that skill. I created my own contract-based research and development company with the goal of trying to carry my own technologies from my PhD and a few other related technologies into the market. But again, the seed support at the time didn't quite exist. That worked pretty well. I was able to find some really cool projects for me and finance my life well at the time, but I didn't see a lot of scaling opportunity. So then I, after around 2 years, decided to move to something else. During that time, because these projects, while good and while they were able to finance my life well, I had some free time. So I joined with former fellow Isaac members, one of the very first crowd investing companies that existed in Germany. It was called Innovestment. So back in the day, there was Innovestment, Seed Match, and a few others that were trying to give the first 50, $100,000 right to this crowd investment. So I was part of that pioneering group trying to do that, and I helped lead that intensively for around 6 months in Germany with the team. I was in Berlin very often, 2011, 12 at the time. Um, that's where I was starting to really advance my, executive management, product management skills, putting them in practice. Um, uh, and I can fast forward a bit. So also that, while a great learning experience, didn't quite fly, right? Like whether investment didn't quite find the right mechanisms or whether the environment wasn't right. We could have a conversation for a long time about that, but that didn't quite turn into what we had wanted. So I refocused my life here back in Zurich with, having already met my now wife at the time. We were about to have a child. Um, so I had done a lot of this, let me go out and start a lot of projects by myself kind of phase. And I learned an incredible lot faster than I think I would have if I just joined the company. But I felt it was not, now it's time to kind of bring this and come back to team. I want to be part of something bigger. Found a company called Hokoma, where I joined as a senior product manager and was able to lead then a team. And that's where I say much more consciously fed into one of the new themes of my career, and that was making sure that I was very consciously putting technology um, to good, right? So basically technology with a purpose. Hokoma was a medical devices and rehabilitation company, right? So one of the main products, the Lokomat, basically put people that have had a stroke or a car accident or spinal cord injury into the machine. And through the experience with this machine and other things, then their brains are retrained to relearn how to feel the body, called neuroplasticity. Long story short, right? Basically, people that were told that they couldn't walk again would learn how to walk again, right?
Mm.
So you see 2 or 3 videos a week, right, of parents saying, "Oh, my child who has cerebral palsy can now walk or is now kind of healthier again," and everyone would cry out, right? So it was a fantastic experience for a few years. And maybe I'll stop there, right? Because maybe that's opening up a new theme of technology for purpose that we want to explore. And in being the senior product manager and being one of the senior leaders in the R&D realm, really helped me kind of bring all of these skill sets together, right? Products, leading a team in a major project, and with the technology, of course, also being a robotics wearables software hardware company.
And how was it you to then make, because I mean there's when there's so much on the table, it's very easy to get trapped in or to lose yourself in being in too many projects. You were mentioning burnout already, and especially if you have high standards for yourself, then you would like to really give in the hours that are necessary sometimes to make things work, right? And if you have more than one dish on the table, then you actually, because you only have so much time, you either need to increase your skill set, which helps for a bit, but then you actually need to make prioritization and focus on some things, right? And so, how was it for you to then make the decision to what happens afterwards? Yeah, maybe you
Yeah.
can say something about this.
So definitely in the years, uh, uh, my doctorate and everything else, that was definitely a skill building phase. So one of the things that you mentioned, right, to squeeze out a certain amount of efficacy out of my time. And to this day, right, I still try to say, yeah, when I do my work, I'm trying to achieve in 8 hours what others need 12 hours to do. Now, whether I achieve that all the time or not, it's not a comparison to other people. It's a mental model that I use to make sure that I'm not just putting hours in, right? That I'm achieving outcomes effectively. So there's that. Prioritization, I'll come back to later. I think there's another one, and this kind of goes back both the Isaac Days was a theme, and it's still a theme to what I try to use today. I think today, the fancy term for it is called co-elevation. It didn't really have a name at the time, or maybe a different name, but basically, it's to use collaboration as a means of achieving new levels of success because you use the strength of people and their commitment, right, to raise everything up, including each other, right? And maybe teamwork was just the old-fashioned word, right? But there's a little bit more to it maybe than just that, because I think there's more of a conscious process where you're really trying to do this. So I think this was a magic element that I've developed long ago that I've been, cultivating, and I'm still trying to cultivate in my career. Yeah, so for example, I was able to apply many of these elements even at Okoma. For example, when I joined, one of the new products they wanted to bring, they had already tried to start it and it had failed at the time. They'd lost around 6 or 9 months on the timeline. Investors are waiting. There's other commitments to be made. So the CEO, when I was initially hired, pulled me aside and said, "Okay, um, you know, March 2020, whatever, 2014, or whatever I think the timeline was at the time." So yeah, the deadline's not changing, right? So, we've lost 6, 7 months. It's now your job to make sure that we, bang out this product. The timeline isn't going to change. Here's your budget, go. Um, and we did it, right? And I think we did it in a way where, yes, it was a lot of hard work, right? Along the way, one of the external software companies we were working with, for example, went bankrupt. And
Hmm.
we had to find a way to save that company or a part of that company just to keep that alive, right? So there's a lot of, I mean, I could tell a 2 hour story just about that one project, but I won't today. Um, but we did that in a way that, we didn't fall into the trap of needing to work 20-hour days to do it, right? Again, it was like through great prioritization, lifting everybody up, having clear goals and a refined skill set that we were in making smart decisions, right? Thinking beyond just what's in front of us and making ends meet and or a connected knowledge. We were able to pretty much hit the deadline and we were able to deliver that product on time with 1 million francs under budget that I wanted to put towards the go-to-market efforts. So
I mean, people like to say this, right? If you perform well under pressure or with pressure, you're able to build diamonds, but it also has a toll on people, right? So this is only, I think one of my earlier guests was mentioning this, that these should only be some short periods of time, not the constant work mode. Just the other day, I was talking with an ex-colleague about fake urgency. So fake urgency that is a consequence of the inability of prioritization and planning thoughtful with resources. So if you are in that kind of stage, right, then you are working hours, 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 and you're putting in the effort because in the very early beginning you were not having a good foundation, or as you were mentioning, like a common goal or a very clearly communicated goal and a strategy that everyone understands and that everyone is really pulling at, right? Because if people pulling in different directions, then it's very hard to move forward. And so yeah, thank you for that. Coming back to products and coming back to like the business side. Yeah, you have been part of a very successful company out of the robotic valley, and maybe, I mean, share as much as you like, but maybe you can say a few words about that because I think you guys, ANYbotics just, I can't remember how recently, but I think they raced another round. So it is one of the few European robotics companies that is really um, pushing things further. And yeah, maybe you can say a bit about this.
Yeah, gladly. So I think before we go too much into detail here, I think one of the things to be upfront with you and the audience, although you already know, right, is that sort of as of recently, I don't no longer work at ANYbotics. So my role there was for many years as the chief technology officer. And then in my final phase, took over the chief product officer role as well to help re-strengthen that part of the team and part of the organization. So I won't go into the reasons, at least right now in this response, as to why things changed, why I left. But let's stay positive or constructively critical with the question you asked. So yeah, I was there for almost 4.5 years, and I think it's really great, and I feel proud, right, to see how we have a company as a company have been able to make a name for ourselves, right? I think more and more people have always known Boston Dynamics for great videos and dancing robots and whatnot. But it was great to see over time a slight shift, right? Where it wasn't just, oh, that's only Boston Dynamics. More and more people now know that there's at least two, right, robotics companies out there that are trying to build autonomous robots, or at least the four-legged robot version. So that in itself sort of was a great achievement. I was around employee number 40 or so. And I don't like to measure growth by number of people because I think that's kind of an artificial metric. It doesn't really say
You
much.
should never, right? You should
No, no,
never.
I agree. So it's one of the jokes I often made when I was working there is recently, right? So we became a company of 400 workers, and 200 of them are human. Because yeah, so we grew from 40 to around 200 people, and during that time, with our mission and also anchored on our product strategy, we were trying to create an autonomous coworker, right? To a robot that could do a certain set of jobs, independent or even alongside other human beings. So we were able to then put over 200 of those into the world that were then doing work in some fashion at our customer sites, right? So yeah, 400 workers, 200 of them human. Um, and maybe I'll pause here because there's a lot more I can say about some of the great times in eBotics. But I think yes, I think also the connection to RSL, for example. I think that's one of the things that should go definitely mentioned or not unmentioned, right? Is that not only did the founders come out of that institute from the ETH, but there was an ongoing cooperation with the institute, and in some of the great research that they have done, we were able to be able to look at sometimes more closely than others, um, uh, through knowledge exchange, all legal. And we were able, we were in a great position to be able to apply that, right? Well, to put our own spin on it and to apply that to real world applications, which of course we did so successfully. For example, we were one of the first robotic companies that commercially and industrially used reinforcement learning for how robots uh, take care of their motion control, how they walk and navigate in the real world. So just a few points that I can highlight. I'm glad to highlight more, but I'll do so. Questions.
What I really like is some keywords that you were mentioning, and because they are so vital and so important, so basic for business, and that was applying knowledge to a product, and then actually being able to deploy this in a commercial a context. Because especially when you're in deep tech and you're coming out of academia, you've been trained to do certain things and to look at technology in a certain way, especially if it's your own work. But being able to, as you said, make your own, I don't know how you said it, your own spin to it, right? To apply the knowledge and the technology to something that has value. And I don't want to use that value word too much too often because it's a bit of a buzzword, creating value for the customer. But in the very end, it is. Can you come up with something that somebody else thinks it's worth paying for? And not getting lost in the technology, not getting lost in the features, but in the problems that you're trying to solve, right? And that customer. Uh, so not finding, and this is a recurring topic here, and not finding a problem to your solution, but rather building a solution for an existing problem, and identifying and articulating the problem. And yeah, maybe you can spend a few moments on that.
Gladly. So yeah, I think over the course of my career, I've consciously tried to fall more and more in love with use and users. Yes, you talked about problems, but sometimes even the solution problem balance, right, in itself has almost become a buzz statement where people say it and they sometimes don't really understand what it really means. Because I have a feeling that if you really look to the users, that's where you're able to begin to measure, right? Or you create the understanding for what the problems are, or are you even addressing the problems rather than assuming you're addressing the problems just by sort of thinking you understood the problem and passing a solution over the fence, right? Or the famous innovation trap where you're doing something new, but if nobody is using it, it's not creating a change. Therefore, in my book, it's not innovation because there's no adoption linked to that, right? So that's why coming back to it, right? Use. Are they using it?
Yeah, disruption comes from adoption, right? So there's no sense in it if you have something that is so wonderful and so great and so innovative if no one buys it and uses it, right? So
Yeah, so that's where I've tried to obsess myself with this, and then when I lead then organizations, both engineering and product organizations, I try to ingrain that, right? Really going and studying, measuring, finding ways to really empathize with the user, and not one time, right? But to make it a constant learning process that we're constantly have this feedback loop, right, to the market and from the market, right? So we're able to track every change we make, right? Is are we seeing the response that we're hoping, or something to learn from because there's something unexpected, both positive and negative, and what do we do about it, right? What do we do it? How's that changing the use and how people like the product? Um, yeah, what else? I think maybe I can connect this question maybe with some you mentioned earlier, right? ETH kind of creating a lot of companies right now. I think yes, that's true. I think the constructively critical way of looking at it is, and yet I have the feeling that that they right now there's too much creation of legal entities that are, I guess, companies on paper, right? That have a technology inside, and of course that's the starting point of all of these, right? So I think that's a fair point. Um, but where's the real company, right? So I think there's a lot of things being pushed out that may or may not have any real chance of ever becoming a real product.
mm,
Too much of this, oh, we have this cool solution, right? Let's push it out to the world. And again, that's a lot of ways you have to start the way. And who am I to say what's going to work and not will not work? But yet, I think the mechanism there's not enough connected knowledge and conscious approach to really helping these young founders understand what it really takes to make a company, or what it really takes to turn something from a technology into a product that has a chance of widespread adoption. Again, sort of the theme of my career, right? And ultimately, this connection of being good at business and product, leadership of people and organizations, and technology is all about finding a way to bridge that gap is the wrong word, but to effectively work through that phase of ambiguity, right?
Mm.
That hard struggle where you can take a technology and you can turn it into a globally successful product, right? And so that's what I've been trying to do in my career. And that's what I'd like to see the ETH as an entity embrace more, right? It's not about just pumping out these tech things encapsulated in a legal entity company, but to really prepare them and help them for their product journey. I think that's where we as a community in Zurich can do a lot more together.
So and this is what I'm aiming with my newest project, to really helping these ideas, helping these people, young people, older people, but really, as you said, um, not for the just the doing part or let's see if there comes something out of it, but really coming back to the vision that you said earlier. We in Europe, there's a lot of memes flowing around at the moment about innovation coming from Europe or regulation coming from Europe, and how we are falling behind other technology hubs, and but. This is about the people behind the technology, and this is about the people, and you're my guest here. So I'm very interested in now that you're not with ANYbotics anymore, and I might or might not have a discussion with one of the founders of ANYbotics in the future. I'm really interested in what's happening next for you because we met at a point where you said, you know what, let's have a conversation in a few weeks when things are a bit more clear and where I can communicate a few more things more openly. Are we at this point now? Are we at a situation where not necessarily very articulated
Let's
or very
try.
defined? Yeah.
I mean, maybe we're at the point, maybe we're not. I think that's, it's the journey. Let's see how well I can articulate that.
Mm.
And yeah, let's do that. So, maybe before I come to me, maybe one or two more closing thoughts on some of the things I'd like to see kind of change in the ecosystem. Because you mentioned, help the young people, right? And I think it's just not about young and inexperienced people not knowing what to do. Again, there are also experienced people at the ETH, right? They just have a different experience because they come from more kind of academic in a research background that maybe don't know enough about the journey ahead, right? There are also professors involved. I would, for example, love to see, and this is maybe a friendly call out to all professors, to not take so much equity. I actually think it's quite unfair, and I have a feeling that there's far too many companies coming out of many universities, ETH, maybe more, where you have then, yes, a professor that had a contribution, but they also have a very comfortable, very secure job, and they're not operatively involved in many cases in the success of this entity trying to become a company going forward. And yet I find they have double-digit equity that ruins cap tables in many ways and hurts the sort of the starting point and even future of the company. I can go on and on about that, but I don't want to create any political bomb here. So I think I'll keep it maybe at those words. But I think there's a lot more like with smarter vesting schemes, maybe simple guidelines, I dare I say regulation, right? About making sure that that the ownership of the company is in the right hands and it's distributed properly over time to the people that are going to bring in the true commitments, right, to go the journey. So that's maybe one thing to look out for. Now, to your question about where I'm at in figuring things out. I mentioned starting strong this year. I think the spoiler is I don't have that answer. I can't announce on the podcast and say I am now going to land here, and as of whatever March 1st, I'm doing this and that. That I don't know, but I'm excited about that. Why? Because I think right now what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to break certain patterns. Um, I don't think that I'm changing this recipe of product tech and leadership, but I think I want to maybe slightly apply it in a different recipe. I've had, three, let's say, very formative, great experiences, level of success as well with working with first-time CEO founders in the previous companies. Without going into detail, I think I want to move beyond that phase, and I'd like um, uh, take what I've learned and apply that in, say, in a somewhat more mature, say, leadership environment, right? Where while these CEOs have been doing great things, right? They also, because it's the first time of them doing the journey, they also don't know a lot what's ahead of them, right? So there's also a certain tension and struggle in that journey as someone like me, say, kind of gains experience more and more and claims to maybe know more about some of the right or wrong way to do things. And then having to then work with these first time CEOs on finding the right mix, right, of their way versus maybe sort of an experienced way that comes from me or other people of experience inside the leadership team. So I think that's one recipe I want to change. I think I made a conscious choice as well, sort of under the motto of like, salary pays the bills, but equity can change your life type of thing. Not from a sense of greed, right, but from a sense of wanting to kind of shift some elements of my life coming from a place I mentioned earlier where we weren't poor by any means, right? But I didn't have a lot of financial freedom to, go to the university I wanted to go to. So these are things I want to change. I've now collected kind of a series of early equity from very exciting companies. They all exist, right? One has already had a recent IPO. European companies IPO more slowly in general than
Mm.
North American companies. So that's where, for I think the next phase of my career, I'm wondering if should I kind of maybe go to a company where their first product is kind of set, and it's now about trying to bring that leadership in where it's more of a reinvigoration phase, right? More of the enterprise journey than the startup scale-up journey. Um, um, More about that base is there. Now let's take a new risk and see where we can run with it. So I think that would be sort of a new nice one of the nice stories or directions I'll go to, right? Sort of that way. I'm not that I say corporate or not corporate. That's why I kind of maybe consciously use the word enterprise, right? Where it's more
Mm.
about this professionalizing things. And I think I have a lot of experience, youthful energy connected with experience that I can bring in to help mix things up in a professional yet controlled way. Or right, I go the opposite route and I say, no, now it's time for me to finally be a founder too, or to join another founder and create something new. And I'm kind of at that fork in the road. So I think those are my thoughts at right now. I invite you to ask a question there, some closing thoughts there. I know there's a few other things like you mentioned, like this always working at the limit and false urgency. Maybe in another conversation, I'd love to revisit that, or now, depending on the question you want to ask.
I mean, it's good that you're taking the time and giving yourself the time, especially in startups. Time is very crucial. Being fast is very crucial, but I like to take some time. And I, in the past, sometimes, as I have not been a founder myself and not on the C level, but I have seen firsthand a few times now what kind of, as you said, first time founders, or even second or third time founders, it takes some time to gain that experience, right? Because if you have a few companies within a few years, then you don't really have gained experience because that takes time, right? I mean, you can accelerate, and the learning curve can be very high, especially if you're yeah in these kind of very fast-paced environment. But um, if there's no clear goal, clear direction, and the ability to be able to communicate this to the entire team, doesn't matter if it's 40 people or if it's 150 or 300 people. This is very crucial, and this is very hard to do. It's not easy to do. So I really like the idea of you spending some times to figuring things out, and then to see where to apply this, where to put it into deployment.
Yeah, and I've seen cases where the goal, right, can be very well articulated and it's sort of clear. The how is always tricky, but that's because you're discovering things. And yet, right, I sometimes there's a tendency to, let's say, um, fall too much in love with one's own vision, right? The world
Mm,
needs this vision, therefore let's do this and do that and do that, and all at the same time,
mm,
right? Over just really going through what it takes to make that first product work, really drive that use, coming back to that topic, and then having that sort of then finance and then really drive, right, the
mm,
next phase of all these amazing ambitions at the right timing. And that's always a very balanced, very delicate mix. And how much have you promised investors, right? how much your estimation's off by, right? What kind of struggles are you facing in terms of, if you can't close next funding round, right? Et cetera, et cetera, right? So,
Mm.
but and I think this is one of those aspects, especially like this new founder mode. I don't know if that could be another podcast in itself, right? I have a feeling that there's a lot of false sense of urgency inside of that book and that piece of literature because I have a different approach. I mentioned the co-elevation earlier, where it's about trying to make sure you're really raising everybody up for long-term healthy success. Another term I use is healthily challenging, where you try to find that zone where there's definitely ambition there, right? And yes, there are peaks, but the ambition isn't allowed to destroy the long-term health of that entity, whether it's a team or.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I have a feeling that there's right now far too much grind, right, in trying to push more and more and more and more, rather than better, 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 better. Um, so these are some topics, right, that I'm trying to find a way to bring to the next future teams and companies I work with, ideally at the organizational leadership level, and having now sort of 10 years of C-level experience. I will, after this podcast and now the new year, I will be starting to kind of, in small summaries, write up some of these terminologies we talked about today, right? Healthily challenging, co-elevation, all these other things into small snippets that I want to be more engaged on LinkedIn. I'm not going to become an influencer. I'm not going to create a podcast, but I have a feeling that there's a bit of knowledge that I want to share more and better than I have done in the past, as I've been very concentrated on these startup scale-up journeys. They've taken a lot of energy. It's been energy well invested. But yeah, at some point, like 4 years at a scale up can feel like 40 years at a normal company. So yeah, so now I'm using that newfound energy I have in this break to giving time for myself to kind of explore a few new avenues.
I'm excited. I'm excited for you, but I'm also excited for all of us. If more people would think like this, and applying and finding ways to elevate more than just one person or just one company. I read that Sony back then had the idea in leveling up not Sony but the entire of Japan, right? So this was something that was when I read that was very inspiring. Yeah, I'm saying thank you for going through your journey and sharing not only the struggles and how to overcome them, but also your thoughts on and view on different things. I think I share a lot of the feelings and the experience and how you approach things. So I think there's a reason why I have the feeling we get along very well with each other. I'm very curious to see what not only 2025, but yeah, the future holds up for you. And as I'm about to finish the first season, I set the goal to 50 episodes. Today, I think will be the 47th episode. So there's
My age, hey, it's great. So
yeah. Okay, good to know.
more and more
So
dots connecting everywhere. I like it.
yeah, so this is I think it's a great opportunity to come back to you in the future. So thanks for taking the time, thanks for the insights, and I'm looking forward to hear what's next for you.
Well, thank you for the engaging conversation and questions and also the time. Yeah, 2025 will be fantastic. I'm not a believer in horoscopes, but my wife read my horoscope and it's going to be fantastic according to her in the horoscope. It will be fantastic though, according to me, because I've decided to make it so. And yeah, and I think then again, being able to engage with you either and other really cool people in this environment in this ecosystem, I think are parts of the ingredients why this year is starting so well and why it's going to be fantastic. So thank you for the chance for talking today.
No, thank you. Take care and see you in a future season.
Yes, for the future struggles that we can unpack. All right.
Thank you.
Have a
Take care.
fantastic. Bye bye.
Bye bye.